Today we are going to discuss a short story written by Edgar Allan Poe called as The Telltale Heart. The Telltale Heart by Poe is a classic short story known for its gothic elements and psychological depth. First, let us have an introduction. The story is narrated by an unnamed protagonist who insists on their sanity despite having committed a murder. The narrator speaks directly to the reader, attempting to prove their sanity through the retelling of the events leading up to the crime. The characters of this story are the narrator, the old man, and the policeman. Now let's directly jump into the plot summary. The narrator lives with an old man who has a clouded, pale blue eye, yes, eye, which deeply disturbs them. The eye is described as a vulture eye, and it becomes the sole reason for the narrator's obsession and subsequent actions. The narrator claims to love the old man, but is driven to madness by the sight of the eye. The narrator decides to kill the old man to rid themselves of the eye forever. Over the course of 8 nights, the narrator sneaks into the old man's room, using extreme caution to avoid waking him. Each night they shine a lantern light onto the eye, but it is always closed, preventing them from acting. On the 8th night, the old man wakes up, sensing someone in his room. The narrator stands still for an hour, watching the old man who is sitting up in his bed, paralyzed by fear. The narrator then hears what they believe to be the old man's heartbeat, growing louder and louder. The sound drives the narrator into a frenzy, fearing that a neighbor might hear it. Unable to bear the sound any longer, the narrator leaps into the room, pulls the old man to the floor, and kills him by smothering him with the heavy bed. The heartbeat stops, and the narrator dismembers the body, hiding the pieces under the floorboards of the room. The narrator takes great pride in their meticulous planning and execution, confident that no evidence of the crime remains. Soon after, around 4 a.m. in the morning, 3 policemen arrive, alerted by a neighbor who heard a scream. The narrator remains calm, inviting them in and explaining that the scream was their own, caused by a nightmare. They show the police around the house, eventually bringing them into the old man's room, placing their chairs right above the hidden body. The narrator's confidence in their own cleverness continues, believing they have fooled the officers. As the police chat pleasantly, the narrator begins to hear a faint noise, which grows increasingly louder. It is the same heartbeat they heard before the murder. Convinced that the police also hear the sound and are mocking them with their calm demeanor, the narrator becomes increasingly agitated. The sound grows unbearable, and in a fit of panic and guilt, the narrator breaks down and confesses to the crime, urging the police to tear up the floorboards to reveal the old man's body. And with this, the story comes to an end. Now let's discuss the themes in this story. The first important theme is madness and guilt. Despite the narrator's insistence on their sanity, their actions and obsessive thoughts reveal their descent into madness. The overwhelming guilt manifests as the imagined sound of the old man's beating heart. The second important theme is the unreliable narrator. The story is a prime example of an unreliable narrator. The narrator's version of events is colored by their own disturbed mind, leaving readers to the question of the reality of this narrative. The third important theme is perception versus reality. The narrator's perception of the old man's eye as something malevolent and the imagined heartbeat highlight the conflict between the perception and reality, which is true and what is false, emphasizing the psychological aspects of this story. The Telltale Heart is a masterful exploration of the guilt and paranoia, showcasing Poe's ability to delve into the dark recesses of the human mind. The story's suspense and psychological issue, its depth, make it a timeless piece of Gothic literature.